Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, 4 nerds, by nerds, hanging out with these nerds.
Ted.
Ryan.
And today we want to talk about hidden roles to keep your players from metagaming.
Why don't you jump down in the description below and sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter. It's a great way to get gaming tips as well as learn how to game with us.
So, we had a viewer request, and this is probably a great topic, and that is, they're talking about they have their players drop the die behind the screen and then give them the modifier in order to keep the players knowing how well they did on the die roll.
Yeah. I would imagine a sort of like mouse hunt sort of thing that, like, dice towers, but it's like a dice tower that goes around the vicinity of the table and they drop it in the thing and then
there's a castle
dice roller thing.
GM screen with 2 dice rollers. One rolls inside the screen, one rolls outside the screen.
Yeah.
But that being said, you can do that. That's the real problem is if you feel like you have to do that, that's a problem with the perception of the players at the table more than anything, because they feel like they have to win D&D and they have to metagame. Like, I've had players at my table where I'm like, oh, that's a bad roll. You're probably not going to know anything. Do you want to tell me what you think you know? And have them make stuff up. And if you get a fun player, it adds a lot to the table.
Well, but to take that to its furthest extreme, which I think to a certain degree you should, is now the players really should act in accordance, like, well, that's fact, and like they might go off on this Don Quixote quest to like do something that they thought was right, and then like they basically spent days doing the thing that was wrong, and the other actual threat or problem or solution has already advanced beyond them. Like, that's the logical to absurdity conclusion, that acting under the wrong information until they can confirm otherwise, which the email talked about, is kind of buying the most into the fiction is how that would operate, right?
And to sometimes that's going to be a major detriment to the group as a whole.
No, I think that's fun. Like,
but, no, I'm saying to some groups.
Yeah.
To others, I think that would be hysterical. Now, as the DM, if you've allowed this absurdity to go, I would still want to try to find a way to be able to, even if it's through more dire circumstances, find a way to still be able to stop the threat.
Let me add a clarification. You are correct in saying it will be a detriment to the adventuring group, but not to the game, not to the story, and not to the players, because it just is taking the adventure in a different direction that was unforeseen.
Right. Well, and to the story, I see no problem. But if you're dealing with a time-sensitive threat, and because of a bad roll, and you went off to this absurdity quest, once you've been proven that, oops, I was wrong, well, there should still hopefully be a way to get back on point to the story.
I mean, when it comes to the Dungeon Master, you shouldn't ever, or you should try to avoid advancing the plot. You're not like crashing a runaway train through the story and like, oh, the story's gotten to a point where the players have no hope of winning. Like, well, there's no point in playing then. Just drop a mountain on the party, everyone dies, good. So, like, yeah, you can give the illusion, the story elements of the story progressing beyond and stuff, but it should never be hopeless, because what's the point of playing against a threat?
Well, no, you bring it back a little bit, right? Some extra adverse things are going to happen because you guys detoured. Fine,
yeah, it's cool.
More adventure, right?
Yeah,
more things to kill, more loot.
That's winning
more
at D&D.
Storytelling. Yeah. But that being said, again, you would not want super negative things to happen, because if your player is totally bought into the bad roll, and I believe this thing, and they know it's wrong, like the player knows, but the character doesn't, but they decide to role play it out and really get into the spirit of the game, there should be rewards for that for them. For doing that, and you want to encourage that. You don't want to discourage them, because when you do that, then you really are inviting more metagaming into your game.
Yeah, basically, like if the only way to win at D&D or to like have good outcomes happen for your character is to play anything to the nth degree, people do the thing that's the most beneficial. So that if you make it be okay and just that's where the story's going for a little time, and then it can come back after they meet the sage on the road. It's like, no, you idiots, that's absolutely not how this works. You can't get the desert bloom because it doesn't exist.
Yeah, or dude, you realize it's called a desert bloom because it happens in the desert. Yeah. You're clearly in a forest.
You're in the swamp. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely ways to bring it back and reward players for buying into the bad roles, buying into the game session, and that's what you want to do. And you definitely want to encourage the spirit of the game where it's not pass fail win lose. It's about the adventure and the journey and telling the story. And the dice are just a part of that, and whether the dice roll good or roll bad, they're going to tell a story. Mm-hmm. It's just going to change the type of story.
So apart from the helping players to not metagame, do you feel that his suggestion of rolling behind the screen, because he does say it's going to come up multiple times every session, do you feel that is a detriment to the game more so than possible metagaming, or do you feel that solution would work?
It creates it very fair, but it's like the onus of having to drop that die behind the screen 20-25 times for the gaming session. That becomes burdensome.
I personally would much rather deal with metagaming, hoping to encourage my players to do what you guys were suggesting, than to have them not know the results of the die.
Yeah, it's kind of a pain in the ass, and under that same vein, what if the DM is that player, right? So then the numbers could be anything, and he could do it, cheat basically and say whatever. I personally, when I run, I like all the dice out and open. When I attack these guys, I roll and whatever the dice say. They say if we're doing a skill check or skill challenge, it's right there. Yep. And I'm just going to leave it to my players to role play whatever's going on and do my best as a GM to encourage that. Not that I'd be hugely worried about a GM cheating, but again, if we're talking about the problem of metagaming, right? The DM in his own way
is a player of the game.
Is a player of the game and can do his own metagaming. Right. So it would always be an issue. And hopefully your players, because I feel like we all start off metagaming at some point, or inadvertently you do it because eventually you have players that are also GMs and they just know so much about the game.
There's also obvious circumstances of if you roll a 5 or less, that's pretty much a failure under 90% of the parameters of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, depending on what kind of.
Sure, if it's a
skill
DC,
challenge it
might be a DC 5 or DC 10, but anything that's a significant challenge, you've likely failed.
Well, it depends on playstyle. I like my skills. If they're trained in that skill, I might have a gradation of different successes. Just because you have the skill alone means something, but then we factor in the roll. Now, if you roll really bad, like a critical fumble or 1, then it'd be like, oh, you have information, but it's all wrong. Do you want to tell me what it is? Yeah. So I mean, it did. Part of it's just play style too.
Yeah. So for just the burden of and the slog, I feel like it's going to grind down your game to a halt a bit. And just for that alone, I'm not really super in favor of doing that.
So we have a nay. I also say nay because it's a pain in the ass.
Like I said, I would rather deal with a meta than to have people have to come over to my side of the table to drop a die into my dice roller or whatever have you. It's just not. It's not worth it.
So there you have it. Just say nay.
Nay says us. Well, what do you guys think about it? What would you do? And let us know in the comments below. While you're at it, share, and subscribe.
You can check us out over on Facebook.
Or you can sneak on over to Patreon to support us in a good way.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.